Slow down, lay your burden down.
Hey, welcome to Divergent with Dan Dunford, episode number 32. I'm Dan Dunford, the host, and thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. Hope you're having a great week. It is 1:05 a.m. on a Monday morning, so obviously I put this off too long, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. This week is the second part of my interview with David Taylor. I've gotten some really nice feedback about the first half, and the second half is more of the same great interview. I really was honored to be able to talk to him, as I mentioned last week, far too many times. We cover a lot more stuff, talking about academia, talking about trombone world today and the differences between now and 25 years ago, and where trombone playing might be going in the future, and among a lot of other great stuff. So please continue to listen, and if you like it, go ahead and subscribe, or whatever the way is that you listen to podcasts. So the song, or the track on the end of this week's episode, is a piece that we actually discuss in this half of the interview, a Bach aria and recitative, and I apologize for anybody who either speaks German or is at least good at saying German well. I'm going to absolutely butcher the name of this piece, but it's, as far as the best I can do, is Ach, unser bleibt, I can't do it, Wille verkehrt, but which translated is alas, our will remains perverted or wrong, depending on how you translate it. We talk about this piece in the interview, and it was really nice to kind of go back and listen to it again and enjoy it again. Bass, trombone, piano, and synthesizer, and some different strange things. I really hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think, whether that's on Facebook, on the Divergent Paths Facebook page, or via email at divergentpathspod@gmail.com, or in a review on iTunes or Stitcher. But anyway, thanks for listening. Talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Slow down.
I didn't care for academia, period.
Didn't?
No, I consider myself the same guy who said Taylor's an animal. He just goes by his gut. He also recognized right away, one of the reasons we're friendly, he's a book writer and a critic and all that, is because he labeled me autodidactic, which I didn't know it meant, and I had to look it up. But it's really a kind of a self-learning, expanded self-learning situation, and that's how I approach my...
Well, I was saying that you say you didn't like academia. I would submit that you still...
I worked through it.
Have
I do have some issues with it, yeah, but and I accomplished my ability to deal with academia by not going into the building, or if when I go in the building, go at night for the most part, And I love academia. I love my jobs. I take that back. Right.
You.
Do podcasts have like rules about cursing and stuff like that? Or
I have.
Like you wouldn't say fuck or stuff like that.
My show's listed explicit language, so you can say
Oh,
whatever
okay.
you
So you
want.
can say, okay.
And I will just submit that that what you just said runs completely contrary to a lot of things I've heard in lessons with you.
Yeah, I usually
love
apologize
academia.
for my vote. Somebody once advised me, recently too, over the last 2 years, because they see how I behave in lessons, and he says that's all well and good, except it doesn't look good on paper.
It doesn't. I mean, I
You know,
guess.
it doesn't look good on paper that Taylor said this, Mr. Taylor said this, and I don't know, man. That's,
I mean,
you know what the nice thing about being kind of financially okay? If they don't want you there, you don't have to go there. That's kind of a nice thing.
That's true. I mean, but like in context, being you calling me a motherfucker.
I don't ever
On paper-
remember calling you that.
on paper-
In fact, I don't remember. I don't. That's one of the words I don't use. Right.
On paper, I guess that looks terrible, but in context, I think that's.
I
what
usually, if I would say something like
You would
that, which
say-
I never had, I would say
with the utmost respect.
with the
right?
utmost respect. And I say this with the utmost respect, you so and so. Right?
But like you said,
It doesn't look good on paper.
He would never say.
So I would
anything
never
like
do that. Right. Although I heard you and Maria Contreras did a whole spiel
I don't know
about
what you're
it.
talking about.
I'll have to listen to that. I'll have to listen to that.
So I mean, to get back to the kind of the solo career type of thing, almost immediately you were not only like premiering stuff and performing it, you're recording it,
Right.
We're putting out records right away.
Right.
I mean, and some of those records.
And I got paid for most of them. Yeah.
Right, and that's a huge thing now. Where if you want a record, you have to do
Right.
all the work and put up all the money yourself.
Right. Well, now it's a whole different thing, and I would still do it. Now I would do it because you just put it on iTunes and you cut out the middleman. Man.
Yeah, I mean-
so now it makes sense to do that.
But that's still way less money than it would be. Putting it on iTunes is still going to make you a lot less money than having a record company pay you to make a record.
Well, except that once you do that, and this was the problem with my solo recording career. As soon as you have a record company putting up a dough, they do the editing.
They do the editing, and they also take a cut.
Right, they do the editing, and you don't have. Sometimes you don't like with some of the records I did, man. One record I did, the Pastels record, man. I start the Pastels record with a Bach aria, recitative, and a Bach aria. I got a $5,000 advance to do that record, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but at that time it was pretty cool.
That's from the early '90s.
Yeah, right. And it wasn't being done for the kind of the advances weren't given out, and they had like a $40,000 or $50,000 budget for this. It was really. When I got the tape, the edits back, I didn't recognize who the player was. There were so many edits in the aria, and I refused to let that go out. I said, wait a minute, I just want 2 or 3 edits in the whole thing. Get me in from the recitative, fix something at the end or the beginning, and that's it. There were like 75 edits in this. They charged me my whole advance to take out the edits. That was a very big learning experience for me, man.
But you got what you wanted.
Well, I got what I wanted, but in subsequent areas, they would put a foot down. Well, like even I won't tell you who, but I did an amazingly difficult record for a composer, and to make his piece perfect, he chose edits which we had a vehement argument in the street, and they finally overrode me. He said, "No, that's enough," and then that was the end of the argument, and he ruined his own piece. I felt he didn't ruin it, but he took away the expansive glory of it. And when I try to relearn the piece to perform it someplace, I'm always aware of the bad edit. It just happens a lot, man. That's big, man.
Yeah, I will. I do want to. I have that album, Pastels.
Right.
It was one of the first records of yours that I had, and I always enjoyed it. But one thing that you've told me on various occasions relating to that same Bach aria and recitative,
Lord, as thou wilt. Right.
there was you got some feedback on it after the record was released.
Oh yeah,
and
from Gunther Schuller.
From Gunther Schuller.
A hate mail. I'm sorry, I probably threw it out, but I wish I had it because it
You
was
should have framed that.
devastating. It was like totally devastating. He was on the. First of all, Gunther and I were good friends, and I worked for him throughout his
Right.
whenever he was here, even up until a few years before he died. It was always his first call guy when he came to New York. But he wrote this letter about it. He hated the slowness of the tempo I chose for the Bach. He hated the way I treated Charles Ives songs. He even hated the way I treated Duke Ellington. He hated it. And he wrote a hate mail to the record company, and he was on the board of that. But based on his hate letter, they gave me another record deal because they said, if you could move a guy like that, you're saying something. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and so I just think that it's funny that they wanted to change it so much. You gave them their money back to get it the way you wanted it.
Right.
And then they were like, oh.
I think it's a great interpretation.
Yeah.
I did it as a dirge when it should have been not more of an andante, but I did it as such a dirge. But what I dug the harmony. Okay. I still love practicing the Bach cello suites.
Right.
But there was no way that I was going to be able to do a Bach cello suite the way I wanted to do on this CD, and it wouldn't have fit in. It wouldn't have fit in for it was the Bach was a benediction, Lord, as Thou wilt, to an anti-manifest destiny suite. That's what it was about. It was anti-manifest destiny, and I did a Charles Ives tune called "The Indians." It's about how the white man sails to the west and kill all the Indian children, and then I ended it up with a Charles Ives thing, very short piece about the hearthstone. How could you not respect another man's hearthstone when you know how hard it was to build your own? So a lot of my CDs are politically motivated. I just want to talk about it because I want the music to stand on its own. I don't want the philosophy behind it to get in the way of the music. So a Bach cello suite wouldn't have fit there. But even so, I realized that this aria, Lord, as Thou wilt, it reminded me of David Sanborn playing alto saxophone.
Yeah.
So what I did was I took the piano part and I doubled it with a piano and a harp, so there was some out-of-tuneness going through it throughout the whole thing, and it was all cyclical, so I really wanted those cycles. And then on top of that, every now and then, I put in a synthesizer floating over it like a Ennio Morricone. There was a spaghetti western called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Of course.
I can't. My mouth was dry now, but it was doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. But there was like this corny synth thing over it.
Right.
So I wanted to add that layer at one specific to make it. I had a whole philosophy behind it, man.
Well, yeah,
it
but
was
like I'm kind of wanting to illustrate like the just the depth in which you kind of go into these things. This is at normal speed, that's like a 4-minute aria. What, 4 minutes, right?
No clue.
It came out to 10 minutes
10,
when
right.
when
and
you play
it drove him crazy.
Yeah.
And then with the Ives thing, I turned the tunes upside down, played them in buzzer mutes, harmony mutes, and stuff like that with string quartet. I thought that through very carefully too. I used string quartet. Like for the Indians, I used a very strident mute, that buzzer mute that I have, the kazoosin, and I had a harpsichord, so it made it even more stringent, and with the string quartet, because I didn't know how to describe death, man.
Yeah.
So I really went into the. I go into the. I enjoy it, man.
Yeah,
I really enjoy going to the depth of it. Man.
You have a reputation in the trombone community, and as doing these kind of doing these out things.
Yeah. My next one is going to be a full recital with 6-string basses, April 10th, Manhattan School of Music.
Yeah. And that of mostly your own music, or
no,
not
half
mostly,
and half,
but
half and half,
but a good chunk of your own music and
right.
then some other stuff.
Right.
But I would with the exception of a few guys who come into New York and the guys you play with, of course, know you,
right.
And with the exception of a handful of students who come in and study with you. Out in say like Iowa or Washington State or Texas,
right.
I mean, people don't really know. You haven't done too many. You have a few things where you've written this or that about what you do, but you did an interview with Mike Davis. But like,
it's a small town aspect of my career.
Right, people can like look at what you do if they're looking at a list of your records and they look at the piece on them.
Right.
What is this?
Right.
So they might not like. I think.
Where are you going with all that?
I'm getting.
Okay, go ahead,
like you kind of develop an idea of like, oh, he just kind of does whatever, and I just like the idea that every single thing is really, really.
Oh yeah, it's more
like,
fun that way.
Just you dive into like a Bach aria. This isn't even a new piece that was written for you that you have to figure out. This is a 300-year-old piece that like you're doing completely different than anyone's ever done it before.
So what's your point?
I'm just kind of illustrating like I just kind of wanted to illustrate like the.
Oh, I'm into it.
I just kind of wanted to draw you out into
I got it.
the specifics of like just that suite takes up 20 minutes on that CD, and like just the depth in which like each one of those the movements of that suite.
I love it. Man. It devil's in the details, or God is in it. Somebody's in the details, man. So yeah, and you grow that way, man. So it's fun. I was very concerned. At first, I want the people to know who I was, what I did. Man, I just want to enjoy my life, man. I want to I got into a thing where I began to realize I used to see. I could never understand how farmers would all of a sudden pick up a fiddle on a Saturday night and start and do a hoedown thing. You know what I mean? Like, and I always envied that aspect that it's a workaday thing.
Yeah.
Music is part of our lives. It's not just like a separate. Also, I have a lot of projects in mind, so I could take a chance and not play every B flat and C natural exactly.
Right.
It's like everything isn't. It's not. I'm not a one trick pony.
One trick pony.
Not
as,
one trick
as
pony.
Paul Simon might say.
Yeah, man. So like, I have room, man.
Right, and you've put out a lot of records,
right?
And you have a number that you that are kind of sitting in your closet.
They're all in that closet,
or you're just waiting. You're mastering still or editing, like still trying to figure out.
Yeah, I've got about 3 or 4 projects.
And
I'm going to do a second album with the Washington Trombone Ensemble in March of 2017, and the first one is still laying in the can.
Well,
right.
And you kind of look at what David Taylor bass trombone came out in the 80s.
Right.
You have the Pew Taylor project, late
right.
80s.
That was big. The Pew.
That one's fantastic.
Yeah.
I got that.
That was one of the first CDs ever produced in any genre. That's that's one of the reasons they used to. Telarc put that out. That was a forerunner of the whole CD explosion, and they used to use that. In fact, they might still as demos for stereo sets. They call them stereo sets. What the hell do they call it?
I don't have one.
Audio file, whatever the hell that is. Man, that was big.
It's if you go through each one of those, like. None of them are really similar.
No, I don't want to repeat myself.
There's been with the passing of David Bowie here in the past couple of weeks, a lot. Of course, everyone's. There's been so many pieces written about his career and his importance, his incredible importance to music. But one thing that keeps coming up is him being a forerunner of these people who reinvent themselves. He kind of reinvented himself for 5 or 6 different times throughout the course of his career. In his case, it was very conscious, and it tied in with the whole MTV generation and videos and all this stuff. Now, the reason I bring that up is because if you go through your records, it's kind of a similar transformation from record to record. And
how do you see it then?
What do you mean?
How do you see the transition?
Well, like you go back to some of the early stuff. It's like, it's interesting and it's experimental, but it sounds like very through composed.
Okay.
And as like the CDs progress or the records progress, like it feels less and less like you're tied to something on a page.
Oh, great!
I
love it. Great, thank you.
You listen to,
and most of it is through composed. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, we're sitting in your, you have piles of music.
Yeah,
on But if you listen to if I listen to you perform some of these, there's a kind of a freedom in that you don't necessarily associate with playing a piece, like if you're playing the Crusted Fantasy, like what it's supposed to sound like, and it's going to sound like this every single time.
Well, that's a problem with the audition process and the whole classical genre now, where everybody is playing the same phrasing, man. It's like, that's part of the problem with the record industry. They're trying to,
So and like when you get further, the record that you released in the early 2000s, the Hymns, Hums, Hiss, and Hertz. Did I get that right? Did I get the right order?
Hymns, hums, hiss, and hertz.
Okay.
Right.
Well, when you get to that, it's almost like completely.
That was a big departure, man.
Yeah, it's completely different than from a lot of what you had put out before. I remember you gave me a copy when I first started studying with you, and I even though I had been into your playing from an earlier age, I still wasn't really sure what to do with it. And I've gone back to it since and been like, okay, makes a little more sense. But I guess what I'm trying to ask you, trying to get to is, like, were you consciously looking at each of these things that you're releasing, and as a way to kind of like do something completely different than what you had already done?
I must. I mean, but. Not as conclusively as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
The record you're talking about, man, I did in 6 hours, 5 hours, one night.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew I had to go there. That particular record is one of my favorites, as a matter of fact. And I don't have a favorite, but that's one of the ones that I was flying over to do a gig in Zurich. And again, the guy gave me like a $5,000 advance. 5,000. That number 5,000 comes up a lot, because a lot of the records I did, I got like that would be the number. and it depends on how many people you want to hire. It's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
But then that takes away from your 5,000. And you know what I'm saying? It's up to you how you want to deal with the 5,000. So I had this gig in Zurich. So I piggybacked the plane ticket to go to Vienna. Somebody picked me up there to take me to the studio in a barn way the hell outside of Vienna. Then I got on the train to go to Zurich the next day. So I had one night to do the record. So I had to choose material that was more unaccompanied,
mm-hmm.
And so in terms of those kind of guidelines, that's how I go. And I have, usually my record projects have a gestalt concept to them. That was a 9/11 record, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't like to talk about the political aspects of my records, but and the highlight of that was I recorded a Jeffsky piece for unaccompanied trombone called Last Judgment, and that one was for the firemen. Was 348 firemen died. But so I had to get it done, and I had to get on to my next gig, and I had to do it in some kind of an economical fashion, and that's what I did, man. I hadn't been practicing that stuff and performing it before. It's just I had so many things I could put together.
Yeah.
I chose those disparate elements and made an element out of it based on really things I've learned from jazz guys where they put sets together.
Mm-hmm.
And not even so much from the concert programming.
Yeah.
But more from the jazz set aspect of it,
Well,
in terms of style, you got to remember, man, I was fortunate enough to record with Miles Davis and Duke Ellington and guys on that level, man.
I mean,
those are style guys, man.
The art, building a good set is an art form.
It's an art form. Yeah.
That I don't know that. I don't know. I have, I almost always have issues with how orchestra concerts are programmed. I very rarely am at a concert where I'm like, oh wow, this works really well.
I have a couple of friends now who are producing concerts across the country, and I work for them and with them. Where they are now very much concentrating on how to put together a good set for an orchestra, So, but no, they're not concentrating enough on that. I don't know that one either. One of the reasons I'm writing so many pieces that are literally, I'm concentrating on writing pieces 15 to 20 minutes in length, is because that's the way orchestras program.
Yeah.
Except for an overture, they really can't hire a soloist to practice to perform for 10 minutes.
Yeah. No.
You need at least 20 minutes to get up there, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I gear that stuff based on that. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's programming. That's something.
So, I guess you didn't. Earlier in your career, you didn't teach
At all.
You started much
50-ish.
I mean, nowadays, like if a guy wins a job in a decent orchestra, that usually comes with a job or two at a university nearby. In New York, it seems like it starts at Bard or one of the SUNYs, and then you end up getting funneled towards one of the bigger conservatories. Why did you wait so long? I mean, did you just not have time?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm telling you, it was like literally, man. I get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock. I'd be out of the house at 9 or I'd be out at 8. I was practicing beforehand. I'd finish up 1 a.m. I get up. I mean, it was just like around the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Really, literally. I mean, when Ronnie and I think back on how hard we were working, man, it was insane. Truly, you can't believe it was like 24/7. 52 weeks, because when the orchestra, freelance orchestras would take off, the jazz festivals would begin, you know, so it went from, and then in August, when you would typically want to go away on a vacation or so, that's when the network TVs owned everything.
Right.
That's when they would do all their promos and stuff like that. So I would take off 6 days a year maybe for a long time, even from practicing. Even now, I mean, now I'll take off maybe 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks a year. But
it wasn't a situation where you're like, oh, I don't want to teach.
And nobody wanted me.
Oh.
I mean, you know, it's like, again, I mean, like the classical guys didn't think I was a classical guy. The jazz guys didn't think I was a jazz guy. The rock and roll guys didn't know where I was coming from.
But you were playing with all of them.
Yeah.
That's the weird. The weird situation.
It was very strange. It was really very strange. Now that I'm so immersed in my own thing, I really believe that it's either because I'm in my 70s now and it's just time for younger men to do these gigs, and I don't even know. But I mean, I'm just doing whatever I want. I've been very lucky, man. I just do what I want, man. It's like,
and you get paid to do what you want.
I get paid.
Then, you know, when it came to that period in the early 90s when you did start teaching, why did you?
Price was right. I mean, it was at that point in the early 90s, I was doing so many high-profile recitals. The New York Times was, I mean, I got really like, it wasn't just like one review. It's like I got tens of reviews, man. It's like pictures and stuff like that. So I was ripe to make a move to go teach in schools, man. I could walk into a school and say, hey, look, this is what I need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I was high profile at that point, really high profile. And and I was really, tell you the truth too, I was planning for my years past 60. I didn't think I'd be working past 60.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's kind of ridiculous to even think about now.
Well, I mean, but
you can't guarantee
wouldn't you think that way? Right.
Well, I mean,
I was a freelance musician, man. You know.
Looking back on it, it looks ridiculous. But there's no way you can. You know, I'm 26. There's no way to guarantee how long my career is going to be. Like, if I'm playing till
next year, even you never know.
Yeah,
man.
like now I would be lucky if I'm still playing when I'm 60.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I was taking so many chances, and I always pissed people off, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then when I went to get into the schools, it was really interesting, man. The classical teachers didn't want me in Manhattan at that time, so the dean brought me through the jazz department. At Manners College, there were petitions to get me out. I mean, it was kind of things at Manhattan in the early days, man. The string players would want to study like Schubert octet stuff like that. The string teachers got totally whacked out over that, man. But just do what I do, man. You know.
So, I mean, anyone, I guess you could say anyone who's, I've talked to a number of your students, and well,
from the early days.
Not from
the early days were rough, man. I was really green.
I mean, I know, there's a handful of guys who have studied with you in the past 10 years that are working consistently.
Yeah, I know you guys. I'm very proud of that.
Me and a few others, and not a few others. There's more than a
bunch
few
of
others,
guys,
but that are around. So
in New York,
just in New York.
That's big, man.
Yeah. Well,
no, it is.
Yeah,
it's New York, man.
You told us to work to.
Go ahead.
I remember my first paying gig in New York.
No cursing.
No.
What? Okay, I was just saying, man.
No.
All right.
I do it's my podcast. I do what I want. My first gig, it was a not a great run. I mean, it was a mediocre musical. 14 shows.
What was it?
It was Once Upon a Mattress.
Okay.
14 shows.
I have a big recollection of this.
14 shows, $100 for the whole thing.
Right.
Not for $100 a service, $100 for 14 shows.
Right.
And I told you, and you were like, yeah, play for free if they want you to. Just play, and then,
figure it out.
Yeah. So anyway, what I'm trying to make is that's kind of a digression, but I talked to your other students, and studying with you is a very unique situation because you don't teach like other guys.
I don't teach. we hang out.
Is that how?
That's the key.
That's the secret. But I mean, you say in the early days you were green.
I was. I didn't know how to approach it
until you figured out.
So wait a minute. So what do you? So
like,
what,
how
why is it different? That's what I want to know.
Why is it different? I don't know. You tell me.
No, I don't know because I don't study with any of these guys. I don't know what.
I tell you, there's not as much emphasis on play these specific pieces, play these specific etudes. Right. Work on this, work on these specific set of exercise. I think probably the biggest thing is there's no Dave Taylor warm up that you.
Well, I do have my warm up.
You have your personal warm up.
Right, that's right.
Sure, but you're not. There's no website where you can find the Dave Taylor warm up or the Dave Taylor edition of. No. Okay. The Dave Taylor Arbin book.
No, there's not. There's not a Dave Taylor
Arbin. or
no.
that kind of a thing. There's.
What's your point?
The point, you asked me to compare.
I see what you're saying. I got it. Okay.
Right. So like other teachers, they'll be like, first off, play my instrument, play the same trombone.
Oh yeah, right.
Play these excerpts that I've culled together to make a perfect trombone player. Play these warm ups that will make you play like me. There's none of that, and I'm good friends with Dave Whitwell and then Felix Del Tredici, and we all have studied with you, and we all work.
Guys are really hitting it, man.
It's a very different sort of circumstance, and why do you approach it that way? Like why you said you don't teach, you hang out with your students. Why is it that you want to do that?
Well, the first aspect though is that I know who's working on this. I know who's practicing and who's not practicing.
Right.
I get a sense of that, but I also get a sense of the personality that comes to hang with me because I truly believe that you guys are explorers and risk takers. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's playing a trombone today, man, is an explorer and a risk taker. And I really want you to find what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And then when you find out what you want to do, to help guide you through how to make what you want to do better, man. That's what I have. I don't have a stake in training. I'm not an orchestral musician per se, so I don't have that specific area where I want you to become an orchestral musician. And the jazz thing, I feel the same way about all the genres, man. I just want you to discover what you want to do, and as long as you're practicing, mm-hmm. and as long as you're staying on top of it, and as long as you're enthusiastic, I know you'll achieve it. I guess that's the basis of it. But you have to practice.
Well, of course. But you never felt...
You say, of course, you'd be surprised, man.
That's fair. Yeah. But you never felt a push to mold people in your image or desire.
Well, so you could steal my gigs, motherfucker. And I say that with the utmost respect. No, I made a joke of that, but you know what the truth is, man? That was when I really knew I was a teacher. When a couple of the guys who would come to study with me, who were really big shots in the scene now, because mm-hmm. they would come in when they would need their master's degrees. After they would be professionals for 10 years. I won't mention their names, but they're really big shots. And they would.
You can't mention their names?
No, I don't want to mention people's names. And they would come to finally they decide, I better get a master's because I don't know what I'm going to do, mm-hmm. if my career goes away. And they would ask me these questions that were specifically geared to what my career was based on.
Right.
I had to come to the conclusion real fast. Am I going to be 100% honest with these guys and really tell them exactly what they need mm-hmm. to do what I do? And my answer was yes. And I never got burned because mm-hmm. of it, But it was a hard decision to make. Look man, there's two sets. I think we might have touched on this a time or two. Because I was so successful in my career, I think I was held up to a certain higher standard, ethically, professionally, stuff like that. What I always pride myself on is that I knew both sets of books. I knew the academic book and I knew the street book.
Yeah.
And it's the street book that a lot of the cats who are going to college have the hardest time learning.
Well, it's a hard, and that kind of thing is hard to teach. Like,
You have to know it. That's
exactly.
the first thing.
Like,
right? But that's the stuff that can be held against you.
Yeah.
But I wanted to teach that because that's the concept of knowing both books is the most honest way to go about it, I think. There's a street ethic and there's an academic ethic. And I had to come to a conclusion, if I'm going to be a teacher, I got to be totally, through my subjectivity, as honest as I can. I think that's why if I'm a good teacher, that's why I'm a good teacher. I don't lie to the cats, man. I don't.
So, you did a print interview with Doug Yo
Way back.
26 years ago now.
Which I thought was innocuous, but I subsequently found out it wasn't as innocuous as I thought it was.
So when I was, a little personal story here, I think I was 12 or 13, and Doug Yo was one of the earlier trombonists to maintain a visible online presence.
That's right.
He had a website.
Still does. It's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even though he's not in the Boston Symphony anymore, out at Arizona State, he still puts stuff up, and really, and his resource page has been invaluable to
millions.
Thousands, tens of thousands of trombone players for the past 20 years.
I would
roughly.
say, yeah.
But he did this interview with you for the the ITA Journal in 1990, and I read it. I didn't find it. My mom found it online when I was about 13, and so 2003. She printed it out and was like, and it's a 2-part interview on his website. It's in 2 parts. She printed it out and was like, she had kind of read through it. My parents aren't musicians, but she was like, this is really interesting. You should read this. And I was.
What'd she find interesting about it? Because I just thought it was like,
it's just a different way of,
You thought it had a definite philosophy to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I was 12, 13. I had just decided I really liked music. It was, we were kind of, she was trying to find things that would help me, that kind of thing. Being a good mother, that kind of stuff. But, so I read it, and even as a 13-year-old, I was, very much affected by it. So, like, reading this caused me, even when
What affected you?
Well,
what kind of an effect did it?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Even as a 14, 15-year-old, I was already looking at trying to do things that other high school trombonists weren't doing. Because you have your standard list of things that you play when you're in high school, different, grade 5, 6, 7 solos. Your Jacobs, your Gordon Jacob, your David, your Grandal,
right?
All these pieces that are standard trombone rep, and if you're an advanced high school trombonist, you play them. And it kind of pushed me in a direction, even though I was still playing, working on excerpts all the time. It pushed me in a direction where I was like, I should try and do like things that are, that just don't necessarily make sense on trombone, and see if I can make sense of them, And I think it was kind of one of the first times I got pushed in a direction that wasn't down that main road. So I haven't looked at this interview since maybe 2005. So it's been a little over 10 years since the last time I looked at it. I was still in high school since the last time I read it through. So I looked at it yesterday and today before coming over here, just to be like, I should look and see what they cover.
If it has the same effect.
Same kind of effect. And I was kind of blown away by it.
Wow.
Because the things that you're saying in this interview, And I have it have
I
part.
see you got yellow highlight there, man.
I have. What are you trying to say?
No,
Sorry for
you
being
got a
really-
yellow highlight. Is that the article right
Yeah,
there?
this is well, it's a couple pages from it.
Okay.
You know, it's like 14 or 15 pages.
Am I going to remember this now?
You know, well,
What year was that done? You know?
1990.
Oh, wow.
What was blowing me away a little bit was that a lot of what you were saying were things that you when I started studying with you, you were like basically preaching to me about the conflict between being a pure musicality and academia and you know what the orchestral road versus in here you say kind of the legit versus non-legit career paths, and it was I can't imagine these the things you're talking about are things that
give me one of the lines.
Okay.
You got
let's say, okay, this is something I'm going to quote you to you.
all right.
You say, let's say that our students can be shown ways of achieving good, strong concepts, including greater understanding of individuality within the values of so-called high art. When people think of musicians making a living other than in the university or in an orchestra, I think there tends to be a suggestion that we should be on the lookout to prevent the demeaning of the values of this high art, the high art of the orchestra. This way of thinking comes from what I call the orchestral academic complex.
I remember that. Yes, I remember that.
In the last decade or two, that we have seen a very positive rise in quality and respectability of jazz departments in our conservatories, but I include jazz orchestras and classes in this type of problematic situation.
I'm surprised I said that, right? That's true. It turned out to be true.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and you know what blew me away in looking, let me see. Yeah. So, you go on to talk about, it seems to me that when a person is 24 and goes into the orchestra, whether it's symphonic or jazz, and then immediately goes back to the college to teach full-time, it can be a very stultifying experience.
I still believe that.
So, when did this process begin? When did musicians go right from college to the symphony or jazz orchestra and then back to the classroom? When there are 80 to 120 players at an audition in their 20s and one is accepted from that group for the position, is that person being accepted because he or she is a great artist? And I'm sure, and you qualify it by saying, and I'm sure he or she is or will be. Right. Or can it be that the management is able to offer the player a lower salary and doesn't have to worry about his or her pension or disability?
Which turns out to be true.
Right. So, like, the reason I bring this up is that, like, you're saying all this stuff at a time before it became...
I paid for that.
Well, I guess...
Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess, the point I'm trying to make is that it's only now, in 2016, that people are starting to actually understand that what you were saying 25 years ago.
You see that.
Now, like, I can go to a bunch of different trombonists, whether it's at NYU or Queens or whatever, and people will be like, yeah, I'm trying to do as many different things as possible to become a complete artist. And I was just, I guess, I keep saying I was blown away, but just like the fact that you were 25 years ahead of the curve on this.
Wow, I haven't think about that.
And the fact that you like still use these you still talk about these kind of things every day, or every time to your students. Like, I mean, do you see that as? I mean, you play with a lot of younger guys. Do you see that as starting to change, or in a positive direction, or do you still feel kind
First of all, it's all positive. All right. When a young guy is starting to play an instrument, that's another thing that they're teaching. Whatever he comes up with, it's all positive. Unfortunately, I still see there's a separation between the classical and the jazz thing that bothers me.
And what do you
have to be more specific?
Yeah,
about
no.
the question.
Do you see there being a solution to that kind of a problem?
I really don't think in terms of solutions. I think of offering people ideas.
Options.
But I'm not a good solutions guy. Man.
You're a questions guy.
I'm a better questions guy, and especially as I get older, I'm really only qualified. I really see how I'm only qualified in specific areas that I've been concentrating in. Yeah, I'm not a solutions guy. Do you see a solution?
I don't know if I'm a solutions guy necessarily.
Right.
I don't know if I
but
even.
if you were, and if
I
you
don't
had
even know
a
if I
friend
have
who
the
was a
experience.
solution, what would he say?
I guess, in my own personal, if I had to come up with the idea of that, you've referred back to the what you see as problematic, if not a problem, within the
Which is what remind me.
which the audition, like the audition style of playing
Pieces of music,
pieces of music.
even like excerpts.
Even you're right, like you've referred to that as being problematic,
Right.
and if I'm looking at it, I say, how is that the best way to find the best musician? Like giving.
How is that way the best way?
Yeah, giving
Well,
everyone.
I agree.
Is it? I mean, is it like?
Well, it is in terms of if you know a guy can play. Let's say one of the pieces they play now is the Sarabande from the Bach Fifth
suite,
cello
yeah.
suite.
That's always on a bass trombone
But
audition.
that one, and then they give you the excerpts. I always thought it was for expedience.
Mm-hmm.
Like how fast can you get? I mean, orchestras were always such a high cost idiom that I think one of the reasons they want you to sight read well is just to save them money during the really, man.
Yeah.
Or one of the reasons that how can you play a piece as generically as possible, perhaps to just financially expedite a rehearsal. I mean, I don't. I wonder, do European orchestras audition the same way as American orchestras? Because I have to tell you, my two favorite orchestras are Berlin and Vienna at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be up in Scotland. I forget the name of that one. That was up there, Royal something or other.
Royal
Something Scotland. And I like some of the orchestras in the country, of course, but but I have friends in Vienna and Berlin, and their approach to orchestral music is much different than the American approach.
Wow.
Don't forget number one, these guys since they're out of the cradle, their parents have been listening. I don't know if that's still this way now, but in my generation, their parents were probably listening to this stuff when the kids were like toddlers. They were like the Suzuki methods of teaching. Man, they want the pregnant women to start humming and singing fifths and stuff.
Right.
They feel it'll transfer to the fetus, man. But so when a person is raised on this stuff all their lives and it's theirs.
I mean, of course, there's a different cultural importance to Wagner and Bruckner if you grow up in Germany or Vienna than it is if you grow up in Southern California.
What's the difference?
Well, you have centuries of, it's like you said, it's their music, it's their national music. Like
right.
These are their composers, their country.
Well, so now that's the case. If you're calling it a national music, how do you account for the fact that there are so many great jazz musicians in Europe now?
I can't. You just poked a hole in my theory. But
no, I'm just saying. I mean, no. But I believe in a national concept. I'm not that we should propel a national concept, but I believe that certain things, rap and hip hop, are certainly much more American now than any other idiom.
I guess to answer that question about the great jazz orchestras in Europe, they don't play jazz the same way that Americans do.
That's right.
They've taken this American concept and they've experimented and pulled on this and pulled on that to make it their own.
Can you think of any ones that really stand out that you would put on the level of Duke Ellington or Joe Henderson or?
Probably not.
But there are pockets.
Yeah,
there are pockets.
And they've had it over there for less time, I would imagine. Right. Going along with this kind of national. I'm going to refer to this
right.
previous interview. I mean, again, finish the sentence. I'm going to take a little bit of circuitous route to get
go
there.
for it, man. Go ahead.
So. You still do a lot of master classes, concerts.
Yeah, I do.
You do a lot of these
more than ever.
In this interview from 25 years ago, you referred to a master class that you did at the Paris Conservatory, and I this is probably the part of the interview that I've thought about the most times over the past 15 years. But you played a piece by Bozza for all these French trombonists.
Oh, I remember that.
And they were surprised that you were playing French music. And you commented on the fact that they were all shooting for this big, giant American brass sound. You know, this Chicago
Mm-hmm.
Arnold Jacobs, Charlie Vernon,
right.
Alessi, whatever you know, this American brass trombone sound, and you basically said, well, why don't you cultivate, you know, this? You have great French music. You know, why are you necessarily throwing all of that out to shoot for something that's in another culture?
Did I come up with a conclusion to that, or what?
No, I mean, you were basically just like, you know, I think the point is you're kind of encouraging them to mine what is even in their own country.
That thing wasn't just a masterclass. That was the French at that time. I don't know if they're still doing it. This was at a place called Châtenay-Malabry, which was right over the Seine from Paris. And this was an educators convention. It wasn't just with brass players. It was like the music teachers from all around France were there. And I put together a set I called How to Speak French in One Easy Lesson.
Right.
And I don't know if that was a failure or a success, but that was my thrust. That wow, how about this shit? You know.
Yeah. And I mean, so let's bring that forward to the present. I mean, you still travel the country and
I'm doing more in Europe now than I did.
You've done a lot in Vienna and
right. I'm in Austria at least a month and a half, or two a year.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, like, taking that, you know, since you're still doing all of these things that you were doing then, you know, do you?
No, I'm doing more now.
Do you? What is your sense of the trombone community now? You know, several decades later. Like, you're listening to these guys, you're playing with these guys, the younger guys.
You know, other than playing in a concert, I don't really listen to trombone.
So when a guy plays for you, don't listen to him?
Leonard Slatkin, conductor at the Detroit Symphony, and a bunch of other guys, when Ian Bosfeld got the gig in Vienna, were very upset because they felt that the European sounds, like the Vienna specifically, were becoming all the sounds were becoming so homogeneous now. So I think that's probably still a thrust. But there are some great stylists. I mean, like, if I mention the name Ray Anderson to you, you know who he is?
Nope.
Ray Anderson, he's teaching at Stony Brook, is probably one of the most spectacular stylists on the trombone of the last 50 years. Or Niles Lundgren, or guys like that. I mean, I pick up on those guys. In terms of when I hear younger musicians, it's very rare that I allow myself to think, wow, this guy is at a certain place. Whenever I hear young guys, I always see the potential that they can go. I don't describe it in terms of are they going in a wrong direction or not a wrong direction. Let me put it to you this way. I went to an International Trombone Association festival, ITF they call it, International, in Helsinki. And they had a big conference there. This was about 10 years ago, I think. Had a big conference there about, we're having a problem. Our students aren't really as enthusiastic about continuing in their search for how to keep on growing or progressing or improving or being more expressive or developing a style or this or that. How do we get them to do this? And like a jerk, I yelled out from the balcony, invite them to your recitals. And the point being, I don't think a lot of the education guys are really not out there still progressing themselves. But I don't know how to answer your question. The answer for me is...
well, I mean, I guess when it comes... You
at the Echo Music Big Band concert at Joe's Pub about half a year ago, a guy was taking film interviews of everybody in the band. Mine was last because I was out doing something I don't know what I was doing, and everybody was in the room. And then finally he asked me the question, Well, so Dave, let me ask you a question, man. What do you think of the young jazz musicians today? How do they kind of stack up to the older cats? And the answer I said to him was really even shocked me because it's truly how I feel. These guys are my friends, man. I'm playing with these guys on a daily basis. I don't think in terms of how are they progressing or how do they... No, it's like going back to how do I teach, man. When a guy like you shows up and you got so much good stuff happening, my main job is to get you to keep on being introspective and to be fearless and to keep going. But I don't put a value judgment. It's like when I said something like this to some bass trombone player a bunch of years ago, and he couldn't believe I was being serious. I never heard a bass trombone sound I didn't like, man. And if there was a sound that I thought, well, that's not true. I mean, it's, but in general, that's true. But I mean, if a guy has got like, if something's really getting in the way.
Yeah.
I mean, but in terms of when I hear a professional bass trombone player or a guy out there making a buck, I have no. Or trumpets or. Somebody once asked me about Kenny G, some of my saxophone players. Because Kenny G was real butt of a lot of jokes a bunch of years ago, man.
A bunch of years ago? He still is.
Yeah, I can't badmouth him. Can't do it, man. I mean, he's like... Well, trombone shorty, man. It's like, check it out. Incredible,
yeah.
Man. It's like, you know, I mean, you can poke holes in anybody, man. It's like, it doesn't do me any good.
Yeah.
It's a bad road to go down, you know. Okay, yeah, I really appreciate that. I didn't realize I said those things.
Yeah, no.
I remembered academia orchestral syndrome complex. That I remember.
Well, I you know, when I was up last week or this past weekend at Edwards, Mike Klobes, I think is how you say it. But yeah, you know who I'm talking about. He actually, you know, he brought it up. He actually brought up this specific interview.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
How old is he?
He's, I want to say late 20s, early 30s. I don't know for sure.
And he knew the interview.
He did. Well, yeah. I mean, so he actually brought up a point in that interview where you say something about if aliens were to come to Earth.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
ask what a bass trombone sounds like, etc. You know.
No, that was my thing. If people ask me what kind of sound you want, I said, well, if aliens came down to Earth and heard my sound, they'd know we were friendly.
Yeah, right. And he brought that up, and that actually that sparked something in my brain. I was like,
where did I write that? Was that in that?
That wasn't. I don't think that's in this.
No,
excerpt.
I gave another interview or two for. I gave an interview for the same journal some years ago called Risk.
That might be
might
what
have been
that
Risk.
might be what the one. Yeah,
right.
That might be the one.
And instantly about this interview, only one or two people ever really spoke to me.
Interesting.
about and the interview Risk. Mm-hmm. The only really person that ever spoke to me about that were a couple of trumpet players who had seen it.
I mean, I read it. It's the same thing. I read it when I was in high school.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like he brought that up, and it kind of sparked. I remember reading this interview, and
I'm
I just
impressed. I'm gonna have to give him a call.
Just
thank him. Would you mind if I did that?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I think.
What did he get out of it?
He just really that specific thing about how you approach your own music making.
You realize you mentioned that 25 years ago and how ahead of the curve and stuff like that. I don't think in those terms. When we were Doug and I, he was in town. We were at the Hilton Hotel. I remember specifically. That's just how I felt, man. I didn't think in terms of nobody else is thinking that way. It was just how I was thinking, man. It was like.
Sure, I mean, yeah, and that just happened to be how it went.
It just happened to be how it went out. Yeah.
So I think the last thing I wanted to touch on before we wrap it up, I'm fiddling with my notes. When I've talked to other trombonists about classes with you, they often refer to the fact that you bring up things that aren't necessarily music related.
Oh yeah.
As an influence on either your playing or on like concepts you're trying to get across.
Right.
Well, first off, has that always been something you like?
I
thought about?
remember years ago I used to be. What do you mean? Is that?
Like, I mean, is that how you is that always something you use to approach music? Is using like different art forms and literature?
Yeah, for sure, man. Because it's all coming from the same place, basically. Rhythm, color, sound, man. It's like art has. That's why I have these pictures up. Art has rhythm, has harmony, has storytelling to it. Literature, the length of a paragraph, the frequency of an expletive, how a paragraph starts, how does the story end. Yeah.
There's 3 different things that that specifically stick out to me. One was one time it was a period of time when you were reading a bunch of David Foster Wallace essays, and you were telling me how much they were blowing your hair back.
Right.
That's one instance.
I didn't say hair because
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah. If I had more hair, I'd say that.
The second thing, I mean, we frequently talk about stand-up comedy, and
right.
How like the structure of a stand-up act relates to how you approach your pieces and how you play, and then. The picture's not on the wall there anymore, but you had on the wall behind you in this little passageway, you had a picture of a basket.
Yeah, that was Dali.
Dali. Salvador Dali.
Right.
A picture of a basket. I remember you one time coming in.
And that was on the cover of Time magazine back when the Monroe Doctrine was incorporated.
But you took it off the wall,
right.
And you came over to me, and you grabbed me and pulled me in close, and were like, "Look at the detail on the basket weaving."
Oh, it was spectacular.
I mean, of course, and it really opened my mind to looking at the detail in a Dali painting, or what's still up on the wall, the Duchamp nude descending a staircase. Looking at the elements of these artists and putting them into your music. It's not really something I really thought about.
It's not about it directly putting into your music. It's about encouragement, keeping your eyes open and seeing something else. Oh, wow. I mean, I could go there. It's, yeah. What is OCD? Obsessive compulsive disorder?
Yeah.
I'm more of an obsessive compulsive enthusiast. I heard somebody in a movie say that last month. I forget the movie I went to. I'd rather not think of myself as having obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm just an enthusiast.
And so, whenever you're reading something or looking at are you?
No, I'm in the moment.
Always...
I forget. My memory sucks. I forget. That's why the pictures are so great for me. I'm reading several books now, like even that Judd Apatow book. I just read the whole thing, man. That blew me away, but I can't remember specific. I mean, I can't really remember specifics, but at the moment, if you can keep your head in that general direction, your head will always be in that general direction. It's like it doesn't go. I don't think too much about the past, man.
Yeah.
I don't hold grudges. The only 2 people I totally turned my back on in my whole life. I don't want to talk about that now, but I just totally turned my back. But other than that, I have a lousy memory for that, and that's a good thing.
It's like how sports announcers always say a good quarterback has a bad memory.
You
don't remember that interception you threw. You just got to go throw a touchdown next time out.
I have a bad memory when it comes to that kind of stuff. And about the future, I do make certain basic decisions about the future, but I'm learning from a lot of the younger, really young cats, like you cats your age now, in the various groups I play in. They're allowing me to grow. How? They'll allow me to write.
Yeah.
And then you know what I'm saying? It's like I always look for new ways that I can grow. It doesn't have to be trombonistic kind of stuff, man. But it always comes back to it because I love the trombone.
Sometimes I think it's better if it's not trombonistic.
Well, yeah. But for me, I love it so much, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the influences, the things that you're putting in the trombone. Because then you're not emulating someone else.
No, I wasn't smart enough to be able to do that. Some guys are too smart, man. They know how to pick up on and emulate. I knew right off the bat, my body wasn't the same kind of a body, let's say, as a Kleinhammer. It was curious why you mentioned Charlie Byrne, not Kleinhammer. That was a curious. I said to myself, wait a minute, how'd you make that jump?
It was just the first name that came to mind.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Right. But I was never an enthusiast for bass trombone players. Although George Roberts and I became very friendly. I really only heard his records well after I was playing the bass trombone. I thought they were really nice and great, and I understood what they were. And I even told him to his face, at a masterclass for another ITF thing, I do not want to be you, George, in front of the whole class. I wanted to let them know that not only do I not want to be him, he didn't want me to be him.
Yeah.
You know, but people need to hear that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know, I feel like that's overlooked, you know, a lot. I feel like teachers need to say more, I don't want you to be me, because it seems...
You think it's that much that teachers want them to be?
I don't necessarily think they want their students to be them, but the way, a lot of times the way they teach, it seems
You're not
like
giving
it.
yourself and Whitwell and Felix and whoever else, Max, whoever else comes to me, enough credit. You guys don't want to be told that. That's why you come to me, man.
Yeah.
You cats are already you. But you guys don't give yourselves enough credit. You know why you're coming to me, because you can't go to the other guy. It's not even about... You don't want to be like I am. The guys who come to me don't want to be like... Or if they do want to be like I am, they don't want to play like I play. They just want to have the diversity.
Yeah, I think that's probably more than anything else.
Yeah, they want the diversity. Like you go to some of the other teachers and they're really locked into their 2/5 improvisation, which is fantastic. I mean, you know, or they're into their orchestral this or their... I don't know anything about that stuff, man. It's like I love playing in the freelance orchestras more than I do in the set orchestras because there's more. I think there's more room for stylistic diversity in places like that. You know, one of the reasons I like playing in the mixed culture, I don't know how to describe it, interracial bands or mixed cultural bands, is because there's more room for diversity.
Yeah.
You know, when you start playing in groups that are all alike, man, then you got to be alike. And a very interesting thing in the Bob Mintzer big band, that's kind of a... Everybody knows how to phrase kind of a band, you know. We gave a master class once as a band in somewhere in the Midwest. And somebody said to me, because I have this reputation of not always exactly being in every beat with a baritone sax, they asked me, well, how is it you allow yourself to... I said, well, and a guy who's running an innovative band doesn't necessarily want to lay down exactly how you play every beat. As long as you have a smooth articulation, you could always just slide around and not have to be exactly stiffly with the person you're playing with. And besides that, if the band leader thinks you're being sloppy, he'll tell you. So just pull out, just go for it, and then you'll be... Yeah, rather than corral yourself, let somebody corral you, man. Yeah, man.
Because you're always going to put, not always, but a lot of times if you're thinking like that, you'll be putting stricter bounds on yourself
then
because you think someone else is
exactly
wants you to
right.
keep you
How do you know what the bounds are? You know, and Mintzer was there. He kind of affirmed, you know, what that was about. The only going back to the beginning of the conversation. The Broadway show thing, probably is the most strict about. They want a guy coming in exactly to play it the way the guy who was playing.
Well, that's because you're playing with someone. You're playing for someone else.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's why the subbing thing is such a hard gig. Man. Oh man, I remember back in the day when I started subbing. That was the rough one. Man. You know, I couldn't. I couldn't do it. When I first started subbing in Broadway shows for Alan Raff, it was unusual if they would be able to find a tuba bass trombone doubler.
Right. And
because I was so young, I didn't have to think about those things.
Yeah.
They cut me slack. You know, I worked for one guy when I first started subbing. The conductor was always looking at me, man. The guy never took his eye off me. And then I realized, I didn't know it, he had a roving eye, man. And one eye was always looking straight, and one eye just happened to be looking that way. But you know what I'm thinking? There's always a way to find more room for yourself. It's in the way you present yourself. You know, I mean, one of the things I used to do when I was first starting out, everybody said, well, don't let the cats see you practice and this and that. I let them see me practice because I didn't care. And it turned out that worked in my benefit because they always saw I was trying to...
Yeah.
They could always hire me because I knew I was always ready. I mean, there's so many different ways to look at the same thing, man. Yeah. It's like... my parents didn't like it when people would put on airs, man. And I think when people don't put on airs, yeah, so they'll piss off some people, but I think for the majority, they'll be better off just to be themselves, man.
Mm-hmm. And you made a life out of that.
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And you know what the hard part is after that is how not to be too much of yourself. You know what I'm saying? That's another reason for always trying to reinvent yourself, so you don't stagnate in your own stew in your own soup, man. You know, it's like that gets stale pretty quick, man.
So
gets stale.
To finish up, you've done a lot of, or recently, past few years, you've been using a specific Martha Graham quote for a lot of things.
Yeah, I even wrote a piece now.
For you pass it out at your master classes, and then for Eco Music, big band for their album, they wrote you wrote a piece called
The Channel.
And so I'll just read part of it. I have it right here.
Where'd you find that?
Wiki quote.
Oh yeah, that's all over. Yeah, right.
So it's there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, and a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique.
Right.
And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium, and it will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours clearly and directly, to keep the channel open. And this is something you've done before. It's not like the first time you've ever used a quote.
No, I used to go to the ITA with books,
right,
and read them to the cats, right.
But this one, it seems to resonate very strongly with. I don't want to say that you can sum up a person in a single paragraph of text, but every time you use this, I always look at it and I read it and I'm like, if there was a block of text, if I only had to use one block of text to sum up David Taylor,
oh wow, that's
this
nice,
is kind
man.
of the idea of keeping the channel open.
That's fun, man.
And the individuality and the energy.
Thank you.
So you've brought that to hundreds of trombonists, thousands of trombonists.
I appreciate that.
So on their behalf, I'll just say thank you, and that we're honored to have you in our lives.
How corny are you going to
I know. You can call me corny.
Man.
But
I appreciate it, but give me a break, man.
But it's true.
All right, man. I appreciate it. I really do. Dan, you know how I feel about you and this whole thing, and I hope you just keep going with it, man. Thank you for this.